Hey guys, how's everyone doing today? Good? Can everyone hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah? You guys can all hear me? Oh, perfect. All right. Well, it's good to see everyone. Here we are this is Expedition 9. Can you believe it's gone by that fast? This is the second to last one. Next week, of course, is Expedition 10, and it's going to be the giants, the sauropods, the long necks. But today, we are talking about pterosaurs, these guys. And I'm looking through my books here, all my books. There's not a single book that I've ever come across. There's not a single show about dinosaurs or TV programs or movies about dinosaurs that don't have pterosaurs. They go hand in hand with dinosaurs. Every picture you see, here's Allosaurus trying to hunt a stegosaurus that's stuck in the mud, and up here, there's pterosaurs circling the skies. Every book you pick up has dinosaurs, and in the background somewhere, there's pterosaurs circling this. They're just kind of everywhere. But you know what? I'm glad they're everywhere because pterosaurs are really unique creatures. We're going to talk about them today. So I'm going to talk to you guys for a little while, show you some neat stuff, especially some crazy pictures of pterosaurs. And then we're going to take questions like we always do. So a little history about these weird animals, the pterosaurs. They started about 230 million years ago. So the late Triassic, kind of right around the same time that dinosaurs started walking the earth. These guys are pretty much, not counting insects, right? Not counting bugs like flies and mosquitoes and things like that. These are pretty much the first flying animals that ever were on planet Earth is the pterosaurs. And they're strange. They're not dinosaurs. They're flying reptiles, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know, because you guys are experienced dinosaur kids out there. They're flying reptiles. They're not related to dinosaurs. They're not dinosaurs. They're not related to birds. They're not related to bats. They're their own strange, unique creature, the pterosaurs. And they went extinct when the asteroid struck, the same time that the giant dinosaurs and so many other animals went extinct. But pterosaurs, we're going to take a closer look. So you guys should have your fossil boxes there, right? So let's reach in. You get your Expedition 9 card on pterosaurs, and then you should have a cast of a footprint. That weird kind of oval-shaped weird thing with the long kind of lines on it is your pterosaur footprint. And what we're going to do is take a closer look at that footprint. Because I have the original one right here. So as I see you guys go into your boxes, getting your pterosaurs, if you have your pterosaur track, your footprint, hold it up so I can see it to make sure you guys have it. I'm pretty sure you do. Yep, I'm seeing, yep, that's it. You guys got it for sure. There it is. All right. Yeah, congratulations. Good job, guys. So here is the original fossil. This is the original footprint right here. You guys have this piece right there. If I can hold it up close, it's that footprint right there. And one of the really unique things about pterosaur footprints, if you can see that, again, this is what you guys have, this piece right in here, this circle right here. If you look, there's a toe right here. There's another toe, and the outside toe. So they have 4 toes right there. And on their joints, kind of like the joints on my fingers or on your fingers, they had these round things, these kind of like little balls that were stuck in their joints right there, which makes pterosaur footprints kind of easy to recognize because they're not really normal. They're kind of weird looking, like pterosaurs. Pterosaurs are strange creatures. So as we talk today, hold on to this footprint as we go along. So we're going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to do questions later on, because I know you guys will have a lot of questions about them. And I got some cool pictures here. We got various kinds. There was hundreds of different kinds of pterosaurs, literally hundreds of all shapes and sizes. And some of the shapes they came in were bizarre. We're going to look at a few right now. If you look at one of the most recognizable things about pterosaurs is the kind of stuff they had on their heads. They had really weird like crests and designs on their heads. Some of them had these huge sails, these bizarre big sails. And scientists are still trying to figure out exactly what those were for. Like a lot of animals, they use things like that to show off, to get attention, right? But then considering they fly, some of these weird ones, maybe it had something to do with flying. Maybe they give them kind of like a sail with a sailboat. Maybe they didn't have to flap their wings as much and the wind would push them along. Either way, they're super weird. Some of them had crazy teeth. Look at this guy down here. His mouth, it's like a gigantic toothbrush. He has these filter feeding teeth, kind of like a whale. A whale doesn't have teeth. It's got all these bristles like a toothbrush, and it pushes water through and filters out its food. So this guy probably did the same thing because that's what he has in his mouth, are those bristles. But look at some of these other ornaments. They're like ornaments. They're like Christmas ornaments. Look at this guy right in the middle right here. He's got this super long, strange thing sticking way up. Now, that's not like a sail. Who knows what that's for? They're really weird animals. This guy here's got this big giant thing on his nose. But as we go through and look at some of these, some of them were pretty fierce. Some of these creatures were pretty fierce and pretty large. Let's see, make sure you can see these okay. And some of them were big enough to eat dinosaurs. Well, there we go. How come I lost the... Can you see that? Can you guys see that there? Oh, is that why it's in my... There we go. So that one's actually eating dinosaurs right there. What's happening? You're not able to see him anymore. Or look at the crest on this guy. Look at that weird crest. Now, of course, just like with dinosaurs, we don't really know what colors pterosaurs were. We can kind of make a good guess. You know, this picture right here, you know, if you compare it to modern seabirds, and when you go around the ocean, sometimes there's birds that have crazy colors on them, or birds in general. So maybe things that lived around the ocean, maybe it made them easier to see in a backdrop that was virtually all blue with the sky and the water, maybe white clouds. Maybe they had some of these extreme colors on them so their mates could find them or their friends could find them. And maybe it helped them. Look at this strange guy right here with the big thing on his face. It just kind of figured out a way to maybe help them recognize each other. So weird how some of these are showing up and some of them are not. It's almost like the picture's different. But they circled the skies all over the ancient world, virtually all the skies across the world, everywhere. Even where you guys live, there was pterosaurs circling the skies. Even areas where it was an ocean, they were there, of all shapes and sizes. Some of them, of course, were so small they could sit on my shoulder. If we look at this guy right here, small enough to sit on your shoulder. Wouldn't that be cool to have a little pet pterosaur fly around your house and come and land on your shoulder and then fly away again? They were neat. Some of them only this big. Some of them had wingspans like my arm. Some of them would have been life size like this big right here. But then some of them got bigger and bigger. As you guys know, some of them got super big. And we're talking super big. We're talking about the land of Quetzalcoatlus. Why is that not show up? That's so strange. Some of them show up and some of them don't. Let's see. Quetzalcoatlus was the biggest pterosaur to ever walk the land, right? Quetzalcoatlus was so big. How come these aren't? This is making me crazy. How come some of them are working, some of them aren't? You guys know Quetzalcoatlus. Quetzalcoatlus was big as an airplane. Quetzalcoatlus was taller than a giraffe. That's so bizarre.
I think it's reflecting.
Huh. Was taller than a giraffe. Let me hold it back. There we go. You can kind of see it there. When he had his wings tucked in, he was extremely tall, 18 to 20 feet tall. And if you look at this picture right here, if I can get it to stay, that's a person. There's a giraffe. There's Quetzalcoatlus. Just Quetzalcoatlus's head was 11 feet long. His wingspan was upwards of 40 feet. His fossils were discovered in Texas. We get this. Look at that picture right there. There's a model of a Quetzalcoatlus with a person standing next to it. Look at the size of that animal compared to that person. That's so strange. I can zoom in a little bit on it. Quetzalcoatlus could have easily eaten young dinosaurs. It could have easily eaten a young Tyrannosaurus Rex. No problem. They were massive. I've dug up pterosaurs before, and the strangest thing about pterosaurs is their bones. As with anything that has to fly, it's got to get up off the ground, right? It can't be too heavy. If it's too heavy, it's not going to get off the ground. Like an ostrich. Ostriches do not fly. They're simply too big. Now, pterosaurs had very unique bones. Their bones were literally like straws. The same kind of straw you would drink a soda with. They're super delicate, super fragile, completely hollow, and that's what allowed these animals to get off the ground. So even Quetzalcoatlus, the largest flying animal in the history of the world, was only a few hundred pounds. That's like a couple of adults put together. It had to be. It couldn't be too heavy. It had to be only a few hundred pounds. Otherwise, it would never fly. So as big as it was, And as fierce as it was a very lightweight predator. And when we find those fossils, they're extremely delicate. And as you guys know, I like to say fossils never lie. And here's a terrific story. Not long ago, they found the fossilized remains of a pterodactyl. So similar to this one, but a little bit different as far as the shape of his head. And when they found that skeleton, right in his backbone was the coolest thing. There was a shark's tooth stuck in his backbone, not in his back, but in his backbone, which means there was a pterosaur, this pterodactyl, that somehow got attacked by a shark. Whether it was swimming, who knows? Maybe it was just sitting in the water. Maybe it was walking along a shallow part of the beach and the shark came in and grabbed it. Or maybe the shark timed it just perfect, and as that pterosaur flew over, the shark came up and grabbed it out of the water. Either way, here's the crazy thing. That shark bit that pterosaur hard enough that his tooth went not only into his body, but stuck into his backbone. I mean, that tooth had to be jammed in there to stick into the bone itself. But what's more exciting is by looking at that fossil that was over 90 million years old, somewhere around there, it was incredibly old, scientists could tell that that animal actually survived the shark attack. And they know that because they could see where the bone had started growing over the tooth that was stuck in there. Kind of like if you guys ever break a bone or know someone that broke their arm or their leg, you go to the doctor, they put it in a cast, they have to keep it still for a while, and that bone will heal up. It breaks, and then it heals back together, and it's usually stronger than it was before. And that's how they can tell about bone growth. So when they saw that shark's tooth stuck in that pterosaur's backbone, and the fact that the bone had started to grow over the tooth means one thing. What's that? Exactly. That pterosaur survived the attack. That pterosaur did not die when that shark attacked it, and it attacked it strong enough and violent enough to send a tooth into his bone. So he had to have had a terrifically bad cut from the shark's teeth and would have bled very badly, but it survived. Somehow it survived, and the fossils tell us that through looking at the fossil record, and the fossils, they tell us exactly what happened. So maybe, as weird as these creatures are, maybe they're pretty powerful and pretty strong and a lot tougher than we think they are. Now, they're pretty amazing animals. They survived the entire time period that dinosaurs were here, the very beginning all the way through, where you have some dinosaurs that came and went, right? Stegosaurus was during the Jurassic, went extinct. Allosaurus during the Jurassic, went extinct. T-Rex started in the Cretaceous, went extinct. Pterosaurs kind of cruised through all of those. They changed a little bit here and there, but they did really, really well. And one of the strange things also about pterosaurs, if you look at their wing, it's kind of like me holding my arm out, right? I have 3 fingers right here. Here's the end of my arm, 3 fingers. Right here, 3 fingers on the end of his arm. But what makes his wing? Do you guys know what makes his wing? Pinky. His pinky keeps growing all the way out to the end. That's his pinky. That's like you guys walking around, and when you say hi, you wave, and your pinky is like 4 feet long. That's what theirs were like. And at the end of that pinky, they had a big flap of skin, like a leathery skin, really, that went from the end all the way down to where their feet and their legs were. And that's what made their wings. So they didn't have a lot of bone. They didn't have any bones in their wing. When you look at the modern x-ray of like a bird's wing or a bat, they have their fingers have evolved to come down and kind of fill the middle of that wing. It makes a structure in it. That's where their bones are. Pterosaurs did not have that at all. It was just a giant flap of really heavy-duty skin. And they might have had really primitive feathers or maybe fuzz on them, kind of like when you see a baby chick in the nest, they're covered in that fuzzy down before they really get their feathers. Some of them may have had even more primitive, larger feathers as well. They're still learning more and more about them because we're finding more and more incredible fossils about pterosaurs, and it'll teach us all about these really strange creatures that circled the skies right where you guys live. They lived all over, and they did really well till the end when the asteroid struck, and then they just could not hang on. Of course, I'm sure millions and millions and millions of them died right away just from all the fire in the sky when the asteroid struck. It would have knocked a lot of them out right there. And it's kind of unfortunate because I would love to see one of these guys in real life. I don't know about Quetzalcoatlus because he could scoop me up and swallow me like a pelican eating a fish, right? But some of the other ones would have been really cool to see. So next time you guys go to your local museum or anywhere, take a closer look at the pterosaurs. Very strange creatures. They were right here and very unique. They came, they had their time, and then they disappeared into Earth's history like so many other things. So there's your overview of pterosaurs. You guys have some questions? I think we could open this up to some questions. I see Sophie's hand go up. I see other hands. Is that Cash down there? Does he have his hand up? I see all kinds of people. Okay, Lily's going to help me out, and we're going to take some questions from you guys.
Okay, let's start with Sophie. Go ahead
Sophie,
and
let's
unmute
start with
yourself.
Sophie. What do you got, Sophie?
Okay. Do all pterosaurs fly? And are baby pterosaurs like baby birds? And
Say that again, Sophie, one more time.
okay, so my first question is, do all pterosaurs fly?
Do all pterosaurs fly? Yes, all pterosaurs fly to some extent because that's what puts them in the category of flying reptiles. So technically, probably some of them didn't fly as well. And when you look at an eagle fly, and then you look at a duck or a goose, you know, landing or taking off, they're not as graceful, right? So they all probably flew, and they all had different decorations and weird ornaments on their heads and on their tails. So their flying would have been different, each one. Some would have been really beautiful, and some might have been kind of awkward, but they all fly. That thus makes them the flying reptiles. Did you have a second part to your question?
Yes, I have another. It's just another question. Are baby pterosaurs like baby birds and have to learn to fly, or are they just born and they can fly?
Terrific question, Sophie. She asked, were baby pterosaurs, were they born ready to fly, or did they have to learn how to fly? I have never thought about that before. And you know what? Part of me thinks it's probably half and half. And I don't even know how to answer that, because the reason I say that is because they're reptiles, flying reptiles. And there's no reptiles on Earth really that get taught anything by their parents. Reptiles, they hatch, and when they hatch out of the egg, they're ready to go. They venture out into the world. They're not parented, they're not taken care of like a lot of other animals, like a crocodile, for example. As soon as it hatches, it has teeth, it's ready to hunt and ready to start going. But then again, you have birds, which are technically dinosaurs, and they have to teach their babies how to fly. That's a terrific question. I'm going to wager to guess that there probably was a little bit of teaching involved, just because pterosaurs would have probably had a nest of some sort to put their eggs in. And once those babies hatched, there would have been some connection between them and their parent. How long that connection was, we don't know, but maybe just been watching their parents and what they did, that might have been the case till they were big enough to fly on their own. I'm going to look into that, Sophie, because that's a really good question. Really good question. All right, what's the next question out there?
All right, I got a couple hands in the Lauren's. Lauren, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Lauren, go ahead and unmute yourself there.
All right, go ahead.
My question is, I had the question when, okay.
It's okay, take your time.
I think the moon is actually the asteroid that hit the Earth. It just bounced off and it couldn't leave and it didn't. So basically, like the moon has part of Earth on it.
You know what? You're kind of right about that. It's not the asteroid, but what the moon is about 4.5 billion years ago. There was a planet where Earth is now, and it was
The Earth collided into a different planet.
Another planet came in and
Creating
hit
the moon.
the ancient Earth. Yes, it hit that, and the explosion caused a bunch of rock to go out into outer space, and all that rock kind of eventually gathered over time, and that's what made the moon. Exactly. So it didn't really bounce off. The explosion created rocks floating around the Earth, and all those rocks came together and made the moon. So it has nothing to do with the asteroid. It actually was a planet that hit another planet, and then eventually created Earth, and then the moon was around it. So that's a really cool thing. Yeah, it's pretty neat to see how things in space come together. All right, next question.
Lauren, what's your other cousin's question? Go ahead.
How did sharks live when dinosaurs were alive?
How big did sharks get when dinosaurs were alive? Is that what you said?
How did they live?
I think.
How did they live? Well, they lived in the oceans just like they do today, but a lot of them were way bigger. So if you were to walk from one side of your house to the other side of the house, there was sharks that big that lived in the oceans during the dinosaur times. And I'm not talking about Megalodon. Megalodon came way, 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 way after the dinosaurs. during the dinosaur times, there was sharks in the oceans that were as big as you walking from one side of your house to the other. So there were some big ones, and they lived just like sharks did today. They ate all kinds of things, and they swam in the waters, and they lived very, very successfully for millions of years. All right.
All
Any
right.
more questions about the pterosaurs out
Gabe
there?
has a question.
Gabe's always got good questions. What do you got, Gabe?
What's your favorite pterosaur?
My favorite pterosaur. Wow, that's a good one. You know, looking at some of the pictures I showed you of the ones with the weird decorations on their head, you can't help but be impressed by those. I mean, they're just really neat looking. Of course, Quetzalcoatlus is impressive just by its certain size. It's such a massive animal, and as big as it is. But I think one of my favorites is the good old-fashioned pterodactyl. I think pterodactyls would have been neat to see. They weren't really giant. I feel like in real life, you might be able to get close to one and not worry about getting eaten, but still be really impressed at how big it was. So I think pterodactyl, that's a great question, Gabe. Thanks for asking me that. Well, let me ask you real quick, if you can type this, what's your favorite pterosaur, Gabe?
All right, he'll think about it.
He's going to think about it? Okay.
All right, Kurt.
Kurt, what's your question?
Go
What do you
ahead
got?
and unmute yourself.
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I was wondering if pterodactyls and pelicans are kind of related.
That's a terrific question, because I tell you what, when I see a pelican sailing across the water, like 2 feet off the water, just cruising along, to me, that's what a pterodactyl or a different pterosaur would have looked like, just like that. And pelicans also have all that leathery skin on their face, right? And the long.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, they're not related. As of yet, there is no scientific connection between pelicans and pterodactyls, because pterodactyls were flying reptiles that went completely extinct, which means that lineage would have been cut like scissors. So pelicans came about just like all other birds. They evolved from little dinosaurs. But here's the thing. Remember, Mother Nature always takes certain designs to fill in little niches around nature so animals can live in certain areas. For example, giraffes. Giraffes are the only animals with necks that big, so they always have food way up high. Or different creatures like penguins. They're one of the only animals that can live in extreme cold because of the way they're built. They don't fly, but they're built like that. So pelicans, they fill that niche along the oceans where they can dive in. As you've ever seen a pelican literally dive under the water to grab a fish and then can come back out. So once the pterosaurs disappeared, there was all this room for animals that hadn't filled those little niches to eat those things and live that particular way. So the birds evolved, the dinosaurs evolved into modern birds, which are dinosaurs, and then that niche got filled by animals like pelicans that pterosaurs would have filled, but they got knocked out when the asteroid struck. So great question. They are so cool to watch pelicans, because whenever I see a pelican, I feel like that's the closest I'll ever get to see to what a pterodactyl would have looked like cruising across the ocean. I never get tired of watching that. It's really cool. Great question.
Gabe said Tapahara.
Gabe comes back with Tapahara. I'm going to have to look that one up. You know, I'm not. There's so many pterosaurs. I'm going to look that one up.
All right, Rivers.
Rivers, what's your question?
Go ahead and unmute yourself, buddy.
Rivers, go ahead and unmute yourself. I think we can't hear you
There
yet.
we go.
There we go.
My first question is, how many pterosaurs existed?
Hundreds and hundreds of them over the whole time period, from the late Triassic, 230 million years ago, all the way to 65 million years ago when the asteroid knocked everything out. There was hundreds of different kinds, and they're discovering new ones all the time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And my second question is, what pterosaur could we estimate that could fly the longest span of time without getting tired? And also, which pterosaur had the shortest wingspan?
The shortest. Again, I'm not really skilled on a lot of the names of pterosaurs, but I can tell you that there was some that were literally the size of this toy, maybe even smaller, some of them. There was some really, really little ones, like the size of a sparrow, like a bird, right? That's how small some of them got. As far they could go, I would tend to guess that something like Quetzalcoatlus, with the right kind of wind conditions, could go for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles in one day because they were literally like a plane. And as long as
Yeah.
they had the air underneath them, lifting them, they could go. However, if there wasn't much wind and they had to work at it, they probably got tired quicker because they were bigger and they were heavier. So I would guess some of the moderately sized pterosaurs, the ones with maybe 6 or 8 foot wingspans, they could probably go pretty far. So it would depend on the conditions. If it was pure gliding, like when you see an eagle or a hawk just gliding, I would guess Quetzalcoatlus because its wings were so big, it could stay aloft for a long time, kind of like an eagle or a California condor. Or over by the oceans, there's albatross. Albatross are one of the biggest birds, very clumsy on land, but once they get in the air, they can soar for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles in one day. So I think it all depends on the conditions. If it was purely gliding, I think Quetzalcoatlus. If there was not much wind and they had to work on it, some of the smaller ones, because they're not quite as heavy and they probably could go further on less energy is my guess. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, and I have one more question.
Okay.
What was the biggest and the smallest pterosaur eggs ever discovered?
The biggest and smallest pterosaur eggs ever discovered. You know what? I'm going to challenge you to look that one up because I haven't looked into pterosaur eggs at all. They definitely laid eggs because like all reptiles, they hatch from eggs. And I don't know if they've really found that many of them, but I'm sure there's some out there that they have found. But I would guess Quetzalcoatlus. I mean, you guys ever remember me, if you ever see me talking about eggs, eggs didn't get super gigantic. Eggs, the biggest eggs were probably about the size of like a soccer ball, maybe a little bit stretched out like a soccer ball. They couldn't get enormous. They just couldn't get big. If eggs got too big, the shells would have to be too thick. Otherwise they'd break apart. And if the shell's too thick, the baby couldn't hatch out. So eggs kind of topped out at about the size of a big soccer ball or maybe a stretched out soccer ball. So even something like Quetzalcoatlus, the way even the shape of his body, his eggs probably were longer and thinner and they couldn't be too big because he wasn't too big and she wasn't too big. So I'd have to look up into that one. That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Dave asked, how many pterosaurs have been discovered?
How many pterosaurs have been discovered? Hundreds have been discovered, and they're discovering more and more all the time over in China because they're getting so many really cool fossils coming out with feathers. That kind of delicate preservation in fossils, they're finding all kinds of new pterosaurs too, and they're finding them all over the world. But I think to date, I'm guessing over 100 have been found in the last 150 years of paleontology. So quite a few, and they're finding more and more. So it's pretty exciting to see what they're going to find, tomorrow, which makes science so cool because we don't know what someone's going to discover tomorrow or later today or next week. We just never know everything that's out there. And that's where the adventure comes in, which is so exciting. All right, next question.
Sophie's got
another question. What do you got, Sophie?
Was Quetzalcoatlus? Sorry, I don't know how to say it, but yeah. And was he light enough that you could lift him?
Was he wide enough that you could? Was he light enough that you could lift him? You know what? I bet a strong person could do it, like a bodybuilder could lift him, because he weighed probably only a few hundred pounds, which is still a lot of weight for a human to lift up. But it's nothing compared to several thousand pounds that like a big dinosaur would be. So I think like a big bodybuilder or a weightlifter could lift up a Quetzalcoatlus, but it would have been awkward because he was so big, he was stretched out. So you'd have to get that Quetzalcoatlus to stand really still like this, and someone could wrap their arms around and try and pick him straight up because he would have been really weird. It'd be like trying to pick up a several 100-pound tree branch that's 15 or 20 feet long. It just would have been weird. But I think that someone really strong could lift up a Quetzalcoatlus, yeah. All right, any more questions out there?
Eloise, do you have a question?
Is that hands up there? Or is that someone just stretching?
That's Rivers. I think we're good.
All right, guys. As always, you guys are terrific. I want you to go out and have a wonderful Saturday. Go have some fun. I'm going to go look for some dinosaurs. Hopefully we'll have some stuff to report to you next Saturday. And get ready for next Saturday. We're going to the land of the giants. Expedition number 10, the sauropods. And you guys have your Brachiosaurus teeth. And we're definitely going to talk about Brachiosaurus, one of my favorites. So thanks for being here again, guys. Be good. Have a terrific afternoon. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.